Welcome back to the Jar Academy podcast. My name is Simi Gosling and I am pumped to be giving you guys this episode. I have to give a disclaimer though, and I hate doing this, so I do apologize. One, I'm late on posting, which I hate doing, but I already filmed this episode and it became more confusing than being in the actual experience itself because the title can be taken one of two ways. So, part one, which we're going to be doing today, is all about that really confused state where we are questioning our own emotions, questioning if we're looking into things too much or being a bit hypervigilant, questioning our needs and are we asking for too much and what does a healthy relationship look like, and feeling very confused about whether what we're doing is quote unquote right or not. The second part to that is where we maybe start to slip into a little bit of the enmeshment. And this is where we start to over-identify with what they need to be doing and their experience. And if they just did X, Y, Z, then, everything would be great, everything would be happy, everything would be perfect. We're going to do that next week. But for today, we're going to talk about that really confused state. Now, no shame if you identify with both parts, okay, because a lot of the time people do, but for the sake of not overwhelming you guys with information, I'm going to have to split it into two so it makes as much sense as it can. You can take the tools I give you at the end, work on them for this week, come back next week, and you're good to go. Okay, let's jump in, shall we? First of all, our little brain body medicine regulation fact of the week is all about being dysregulated. And the reason why it's about being dysregulated is because I actually have two facts and I couldn't pick. So we're going to talk about both because they're very much related. When we are dysregulated, or what I often call on my content on Jar emotionally flooded, so we are in like a peak sympathetic state. We're triggered, something's happened, we're very emotional with our partners or the people that we're dating, and we can't see clearly, and our prefrontal cortex goes offline. And when this prefrontal cortex goes offline, we are no longer available for rationing with ourselves or logic. Everything is emotional. We're very much hypervigilant to look for clues. Now, two things with this. Number one is when we're in this state, we often miss signs for emotional connection. We can interpret neutral or even positive signs as threats. Even people's faces can look angrier than they are. And we don't want to aim for this false sense of perfection and shame ourselves for being there. But what we do want to do in our relationships is be aware when we are in that state where we are so wound up that we can't see clearly and it's just so zoomed in. Because when we are there and we are not aware, this is where we start to fall into our unmanaged conflict styles. So we're just bringing a bit of an awareness to that, okay? Our second little mini fact is about clarity. Often, when we talk about clarity, we say make space and clarity will come. And that sounds woo and a bit like, okay. And we get in this habit of trying to think our ways out of specific situations. And this relates a lot to what we're talking about today, where we're like, is it them? Is it me? And we sit there and we ruminate and we ruminate and we ruminate. And often when we're ruminating, we're telling the brain, hey, there's kind of like this danger, there's this thing that's not right, and we're activating our nervous system, and we continue to think in these circles or these patterns or these loops without ever actually finding answers. But when we take space, and I don't mean just physical space, I mean space from thinking about it, like going and doing a yoga or a meditation or doing some coloring or go to a fucking puzzle. I love a puzzle, by the way. And creating a little bit of a circuit breaker in the brain, what we actually do is we allow our prefrontal cortex to be fully online, the part for rational decision making, and that part of our brain then drops in with like a very clear picture. And that's why sometimes when you take that space, all of a sudden this clarity thought comes in and you're like, oh, that's the answer. That's so simple. So it's not actually woo-woo, it's just neuroscience, okay? On that note, if you are someone who is struggling with is it them, is it me, in the immediate moment, that's my recommendation. Create some space for clarity to drop in because it will help and it will work. But on the larger scheme of things, we have a bit of a problem, right? Particularly if you are someone who is doing this a lot, particularly if you're constantly second guessing your own feelings and emotions, etc. So I'm going to give you guys some tools at the end. But before we jump into just giving you guys tools, we also need to do some psychoeducation so you guys get understanding of where this might come from, because that's going to really help us know the best method to approach this with to move forward, okay? So this isn't about over-identifying with the past, but it's just gaining some awareness, like where might I fall into this and what might be coming through with this. We're going to start with childhood, but not everything comes from childhood, so bear with me. In childhood, if we had parents who weren't emotionally available or showing emotional attunement to our emotions, so that might be as simple as asking like, and how does that make you feel? Or as simple as when you're crying like, oh, you're sad, it's okay to be sad, and validating that experience, then we often are met with the opposite, which is shame around our emotions, or our emotions being too much by being sent to our room, etc. And over time, we can start to develop empathy loops for everyone else's emotions and understand theirs, but ours might be weaker and we have gaps in our emotional mapping. 2, we can start to develop schemas around this. Schemas themselves are not bad things, okay? Schemas in schema theory is all about the way that we make sense of the world. And because we learn so much information as young children, we kind of categorize them into stories. Think of like Inside Out, if you've seen that movie, where like their memories come in and like their balls are a color and then eventually they become like a core belief, or maybe that's in Inside Out too. Either way, great movie. So we start to create these stories and these narratives. This is also where we kind of can see stereotypes start to form, because as children, we can create these schemas around what we think things should look like, okay? But sometimes these schemas, when we don't have a positive childhood experience or around our emotions, then we can create stories or beliefs that don't actually serve us. So the reason that I bring this up is when we have these schemas and when we have these beliefs about ourselves, we can start to question our emotions a lot because we don't know, am I being too much? Am I da-da-da? Because it's based on a past experience, right? The second thing with that is sometimes we can think people always leave, people always let me down, I always have to do everything by myself. Self-limiting beliefs contribute to this as well, by the way. And all these experiences that we can become hyper vigilant to look for confirmation bias. So, and this can contribute to the sense of, is it them, is it me? Because we aren't actually looking at what we're doing. We're looking to see if what they're doing is creating a story so we can confirm a belief to ourselves, okay? That's something to be aware of. Next part. When we are in relationships that may have been toxic or even dysfunctional as young adults or adults, and we have to fight for our experiences to be heard and to be validated and to be understood, it creates a subconscious narrative that we start to second guess our emotions. Sometimes if you have been victim to outright gaslighting, you're going to very much struggle with this a lot, but sometimes it's not even full gaslighting in the sense of changing what happened, but also just constantly made to question yourself and your feelings and how valid they are. Then we carry that forward. Okay, it doesn't just go away and we suddenly get our self-trust back, but a lot of the times you will hear from people who have been in quite toxic relationships or dysfunctional relationships that there are a lot of times they overrid their internal knowing and their gut beliefs, and it kind of distorts our relationship to ourselves, our feelings and emotions, and make us can guess ourselves, okay? Now, the third part of this is having a lot of unprocessed emotions and chronic stress. When I talk about stress, everyone goes, oh, like I don't have stress. When I had chronic stress, I didn't think I had chronic stress, okay? So just hear me out on this one. When we have unprocessed emotions or chronic stress, it's not necessarily like you were just so stressed out. That's not just the only symptom of it. Often, what actually happens is that we weaken the mind-body connection, or there's this part of the brain called the insula, and the insula feels into our body. And it lets us know when we need to go to the toilet, when we're hungry, when we're feeling anxious, when a boundary might be crossed and we're kind of like, oh, that didn't feel good. And we have that body knowing, okay? And over time, we can weaken this connection so that we start to not even really know how we feel. And you can see this a lot once you start to learn this. If you ask someone like, and how do you feel about that? And they go, I don't know. They don't say, I don't know, because they're just trying to hide it from you. Maybe sometimes in some cases, but I've seen a lot of, particularly males who have been taught to suppress their emotions. You ask them, how do you feel about that? And they don't know. And they genuinely do not have that connection to feel into their body. And that's a whole nother journey to go down, and where somatic work really is beneficial for a lot of people. But obviously it really does contribute to what we might be feeling here, because even though we might be able to feel when we're hungry or feel when we're anxious, if this relationship isn't nurtured properly, it does contribute to feeling quite unsure about ourselves, okay? It's not a one-time fix thing. I still work my mind-body connection because I want that relationship to grow really strong, and because I want to be one of those people where someone says to me, you're this, and I'm able to be like, I'm not, because I've gone through every corner, I've turned over every stone, I'm so connected to myself. I know what my intentions are, I know what I feel, I know my experience, or my perception of. Anyway, so so many little rabbit holes. Now, these are obviously 3 of the big kind of root causes, okay? If you don't identify with any of them, that's okay, take them with a grain of salt. But I wanted to share them because you might be like, oh, I relate to one, I relate to all 3. Oh my God, this isn't just a in the moment thing. This is something that I need to work on. And it's a very powerful relational tool because it helps us come out in our relationships with more clarity about what we're feeling, and also to know what is our emotion and be secure in that, and what is theirs, and have that understanding and that compassion because we have it towards our own emotions. So what do we do about it? Okay, like this is all great information, but awareness enough doesn't change anything. I've said it a million times, I'll say it a million times more. Awareness alone is not enough to create behavioral change. So we actually have to repeat patterns to create new ways of being. So the first one, a tool for kind of in the moment, but something that you can also use ongoing. And particularly if you're serious about this and you're like, I'm freaking sick of second guessing myself and not knowing and feeling this confused state, then this is something you can work on. So somatic tracking and emotional labeling. So what I want you guys to do is next time that you're starting to feel like, oh, is it them? Is it me? What are you feeling right now? Hypothetically, anger in my chest. Okay, amazing. If this anger could speak, what would it say? And often, as weird as that sounds, when you ask it, it might say like, this always happens to me, you know, I never did it. And it's like, boom, that's a schema. Okay, because I'm now, or a self-limiting belief, either one, doesn't really matter. But now I know that I'm not just reacting from the lens of now, I'm reacting from the lens of the past because there's a story. Okay, there's a whole belief system behind that this is what always happens to me. And if you are someone that struggles to do that and you want to work on this, do it throughout the day. Like if I did it right now, for me, if I ask myself like, what do I feel right now? I feel excited. What do I feel like? I feel like in my throat. Why? Because I'm doing the podcast, okay? Anyway, but it's going to help you guys start to really figure out and identify your different emotions and your different stories and your different narratives. And particularly at the start, you might ask it like, what would you say right now? And nothing might come to you. Keep working on it and you'll start to drop into that experience more and more. Now, the second one is again an in the moment one, and I call it the 3+1 perspective. So when something happens, ask yourself, what do I feel right now? I feel angry, I feel hurt, you know, they did this. Okay, what might they be feeling right now? They might be feeling, let me give you an example actually, it's going to make it less confusing. Hypothetically, let's say that I was talking to my partner and they were on their phone, right? And in that moment, I felt unheard, I felt unseen, I felt like what I was saying wasn't important, I didn't feel acknowledged, okay? Now to my partner, who does work a lot from his phone, so he might be feeling stretched. He might be feeling like he's trying to balance important things and balance me, and may have been on his phone because he was answering a work email and I didn't realize, and I thought he was on Instagram. Now, the third one is, what would an outside party see? What that outside party or that neutral party might see would maybe depend on their own beliefs. So that's something you're going to be aware of. They might say, she went for a bid for connection, he didn't give it to her because he was prioritizing work. Someone else might say, he was in the middle of doing something really important and she didn't ask and therefore reacted. So it can kind of go both ways. What that kind of does is it helps to get clear on what maybe the facts are, particularly if we're stuck in our own internal experience of being like, oh, should I have da-da-da? You can validate that both perspectives are true simultaneously. And a lot of the time when we have arguments and disagreements, the fact is two people have experiences that are completely true. And that's why it's important, even though we don't necessarily agree with someone, to still validate their experience, right? Because it's like these two people have their own realities that is happening and coexisting, but maybe there's something now that we have the facts and there's a bit of a misalignment that we can check in on the future. And that might be him letting me know when he's going to work from his phone for a bit so I don't interrupt him, or maybe me asking when I approach the situation. Either way, there's a way to compromise and to figure it out. So our next two are really important if you were someone that identified with some of the things I may have mentioned in the kind of bulk of this episode. And that's when we don't necessarily have that emotional attunement relationship with ourselves. The first one is developing self-trust. The reason that self-trust is so important is not just about trusting ourselves that we're going to turn up and do the things and blah, 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 but when we know that we are able to take ownership even when it's not in our favor, is this going to help us understand ourselves a little bit better, okay? So how do we build self-trust? One, sticking to habits and routines that we said we're going to do. Don't overcommit yourself to things, but if you say, I'm going to get up in the morning and I'm going to drink a liter of water, get up in the morning and drink a liter of water. And when you don't give up. Still be like, oh, okay, no, it's all right. It's 4 p.m. I'm going to drink my liter of water now and I'm going to try again tomorrow. And you're going to build this relationship with yourself because your own subconscious is watching. You know what I mean? Your subconscious knows whether or not you were sticking to the things that you said you're going to do. One of the big ones that relates about self-trust to this episode in particular is tracking internal yeses and nos in real time. So if I have a friend that maybe wants me to go do something and I'm like, oh, I don't really want to do that, then that's important to acknowledge. Like, oh, my body just gave me a piece of information that it didn't feel like it wanted to do that I didn't want to go and do that thing. So I'm going to acknowledge that and I'm going to honor that and I'm going to practice setting small boundaries. The third one is acknowledging when something feels off without spiraling, okay? Because that emotion isn't bad. So we're starting to create a relationship with our emotions of honoring how we're feeling. So when I might be feeling anxious, rather than, oh my God, I'm feeling anxious, I got to regulate, I got to calm down, and you're just becoming a spiral mess. Instead, be like, I feel a bit anxious right now. That's okay. I have a test tomorrow, so that's probably a pretty human experience. And what could I be doing that would honor that experience right now? And just maybe show my subconscious parts of myself that I'm here to support myself and that it's okay to feel. And really creating that emotional attunement with yourself. All of that will help build your self-trust to know that you are going to turn up when emotions are hard, that you are going to honor your emotions, that you're not going to suppress your emotions, that you're not going to, all of that helps with this internal dialogue, okay? Our next one is replace self-care with self-referencing. Self-care is not just bubble baths and, doing fun things all the time and nice positive affirmations. It's actually the way that we turn up and support ourselves. And the reason that this one is important is it swaps us from external referencing to more internal referencing. So asking ourselves, how do I feel today? What do I want to do based on how I feel? If I was dating myself right now, how would I support me right now? And this is about, one, understanding your internal dialogue, but two, you're actually going to start to create a bit of a relationship with yourself where you start to meet your bare minimum. And this is really powerful if you're dating, particularly you're dating people who probably aren't the best for you, because you're going to meet your bare minimum and you're going to start to look for people who add to that, not take away from that. Our fifth and final tool is to create a doubt dialogue. particularly if you are starting to see it ongoing. And this is essentially like a journal, but particularly towards doubt. Obviously, don't read this to anyone, but write down when you're having a doubt about the relationship, about the situation, about whatever it might be. And then under that, be like, what part of me is speaking? So remember the first one we dropped in anger. Who is angry? Okay, like my inner child, for example, is angry, or I'm angry because my feelings never got heard or never got seen. Okay, who is that? What is that? This isn't about over identifying and just being obsessed with your own inner world, but what this does is when it starts to be written out, when it's occurring a lot, it can help you see on paper rather than just getting lost in your thoughts of like, okay, I'm feeling doubt, but that actually comes from this. Okay, I'm feeling doubt, but no, that behavior that they just didn't actually sit well with me. So that I'm not overreacting there, because I'm responding to that situation proportionately, and it's going to help you to see where things link up and where things are linking to the past, and help create a little bit of a map for you. Okay. Either way, there's 5 tips. I'm hoping that this episode was a little bit clearer for you, because I'm not freaking filming it for a third time. Next week, we are really diving into if you are someone who is wanting your partner to do a lot of the work, because maybe you've done a lot of it, but it's like if they just change this one thing, then my experience would be better. And is this something I should be doing for this? And and you're kind of over identifying with their experience. I will see you guys next week.